David McConnell's new novel, The Silver-Hearted, is a kind of adventure story narrated by an unnamed person set in an unnamed city. I'm Bob Hughes, here with David McConnell to talk about his book, which Edmund White called a perfect work of art. Hi, David.
Hey, thanks, Bob.
So could you give us a little plot from this book, which doesn't really have much of a plot, it's very elusive, but give us the broad outline of the story.
Sure, it does have a plot. It's a very simple one. It starts out, it's sort of a situation that we follow all the way through. It starts out with a narrator who's sort of spoiled, rich, and then suddenly I take away all of his money, all of his past experience, and I put him in a situation that runs the entire course of the novel, and that's basically an uprising in a small, sort of exotic, tropical country. And it's just sort of incident after incident of fear and terror and anxiety. And throughout this whole period, he's trying to guard a large amount of money that he's responsible for. And then, in the end, you find out whether he's successful or not.
Well, you find that out later, yes. The reader, while going through the book, experiences a kind of dislocation because you don't know exactly where this is set. For myself, when reading it, I thought at the beginning it was perhaps in Eastern Europe, and then perhaps in the Mediterranean, then perhaps in the Indian Ocean. And this was deliberate to give you a sense of dislocation, I assume.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like a carrier shell, and I just sort of took little bits of, the past from the waterfront novels and a past from the sort of adventure novels that Stevenson wrote, and just tried to create this atmosphere, and it is totally dreamlike in the end.
Well, there's a lot of deception within the novel, and people aren't necessarily speaking the truth to anyone, and sometimes you don't even realize that the narrator is actually speaking the truth or not.
Right.
And you use a phrase throughout the novel called "out of true," which means not level or something, and I'm assuming, again, that this is a deliberate way to let us know that things aren't what they seem between anyone here.
Absolutely, yeah. Out of true, using that phrase, and there are several others, and I'm very conscious of using language all the way through, but really it's a book that's made up all of incident. I mean, it's not structured like an ordinary novel in many ways, and I think that's apparent that this is a book, even though it's a very literary book, it's a book by someone who is not necessarily coming out of an ordinary literary tradition, and in fact, someone who grew up on films and movies and TV, and if you sort of strip away the exterior of the book, what you're left with is sort of a storyboard. I mean, it's a very incident heavy. You go from one scene to one scene to one scene, and there's no sort of pause for reflection. And I decided, well, I'll do it that way because that's that sort of filmic way of imagining a story is much more natural to me, and then I'll add the literary part on in the way that I'm telling it. So it's actually, I use highly literary language to describe a fairly cinematic, fast-moving adventure story.
There's also a real sense throughout of attractions between people that are not as real as they think, or that are momentarily real only. And it goes back and forth between desire and the lack of desire, of knowledge of somebody, and then a total ignorance of this person's motives, of a sense that you love instantly, and then you fall out of love instantly with these people. And the whole culture within these seaside port cities where it takes place is amorphous, androgynous in a way, but also violent.
Yeah.
Too. It's like the palpable distrust that emotions wreak upon us in terms of how we conduct ourselves in the world. Our narrator spins out for us because he's a very violent person.
Absolutely.
And then he, in a strange affect, doesn't seem to remember his violence. Like a dog barking, biting somebody, then the next minute is totally over it.
Yeah. The characters are all male in the book, almost exclusively male, but as you say, sometimes androgynous. And I wrote somewhere that it's really not about homosexuality at all, and it has nothing to do with that, and that it's much more akin to prison sexuality, and it has this, all you have is the surface that you deal with.
Aspect to it.
A little bit.
A little bit.
Sure.
Not entirely there, but there's a kind of homage to that.
Yeah.
I think. And the rules of this society are being made up as you go along, although there
Right.
seems to be a hierarchy of sorts. No one is
Yeah.
quite sure where he is.
Right.
Well, thanks for being with us.
Thanks a lot, Bob.
I'm Bob Hughes, here with David McConnell, author of The Silver Hearted.